Well, greetings, everyone. My name is Father Peter Fink, and I am a retreat director at Ignatius House in Atlanta. There's something in the text that we set before you today that somewhat bothers me. The text is when Jesus says, "Whoever believes in me will do the things that I do, and even greater, because I am going to the Father." Well, I have lots of emotions whenever I ponder that statement. I think I believe in Jesus. At least that's what the thrust of my life has been, even though, like my namesake Peter, I have had some doubts. I've wandered a bit, possibly even betrayed. But the first set of emotions is really a challenge to my faith. Do I believe enough? And the second has to deal with events in my life, the inability that I have to forgive someone or to trust someone and to trust in the power that God is in my life. Do you feel like that sometimes? Look at Peter walking on water, brave Peter, and then sinking because he didn't believe enough. Oh, you of little faith. The word which Jesus spoke is in John's Gospel, of course, and the beginning of the Last Supper discourse, which is Jesus' final words to his friends. And like all Gospel stories, this was written well after Jesus died and was experienced as risen from the dead. And it is the last of the four Gospels to be written. So it takes for granted the threefold promise of Jesus. One, that he was exalted, which is what the ascension is about, exalted after his death. Secondly, that he will come again at the end of time, when all creation is complete. And thirdly, that he remains with us even to the end of time. And this statement captures that third promise, that Jesus is always with us. I remember a long time ago, I was at a party here in Atlanta with some friends, and one of the guests was in a wheelchair. She had just had an accident, and so she was in the wheelchair. And we gathered around to pray for her. And I remember thinking, I really believe in the power of prayer, but if she got up and walked, I would have run. I think I would have been quite frightened by that whole statement. But if Jesus were there, if Jesus was acting through us, she might have done just that. But maybe I was thinking too literally. Healing can take shape in a variety of ways. Yes, she could have gotten up from the chair and walked. Such healing has happened in the history of the church. It's rare, but, I think of my favorite shrine of Lourdes, where people do, in fact, find that kind of miraculous healing. But healing is something that touches the heart, and it can take many different shapes, depending on what we find that needs healing. I also like to tell the story of a young high school student who is coming at the end of his senior year. He's a bright student, a good athlete, wants to go to a fine university and be a good athlete. And then at one point, he has a car accident and is told he'll never walk again. Now that, of course, sets in all sorts of questions. The stage for the if only crowd or the how could God crowd. And there are no answers to those questions, so they're kind of foolish questions, but we ask them anyway. But the young man really has two choices, yes or no. If he says no, well, then he joins the crowd of the if only, or the how could God, filled with resentments and anger and all sorts of things like that. But if he says yes, okay, this happened, now what? Great freedom. Look at the great freedom he has to be able to say, I accept this revelation now in my life. Now what? So life is filled with revelations to which we can only say, I believe, or I refuse to believe, or yes and no. And the real power of Christ is to reshape our own perception of life in the direction of freedom, in the direction of love, in the direction of peace. That's what it means when he says, whoever believes in me can do the things that I do, and even greater, can bring this world deeper and deeper into peace and faith and hope and love. That's what it means. Whoever believes in me will do the things I do, and even greater. Now, the church had to discover that with regard to forgiveness of sin also. Jesus was always ready to forgive whatever was set before him. All he needed to look at was the faith of the person presenting themselves. Look what he says to the woman caught in adultery after the elders had all gone away. Has no one condemned you? Well, neither will I condemn you. Well, look at, again, Peter, the man who betrayed him during his passion. All Jesus asks him is, do you love me, Peter? I mean, there's no intimidation, there's no revenge there. He's always ready to forgive. Now, the church had to discover that too. Originally, baptism was for the forgiveness of sin because you join yourself to Christ, and by joining yourself to Christ, that was the forgiveness of sin. But it didn't last, okay? And so you go from, Mark's gospel doesn't have this, Matthew's gospel, which follows Mark and takes a lot of Mark, but adds something to it. And what he has in the Last Supper discourse is, this is my body, this is my blood for the forgiveness of sin. So it really began to say that it's the Eucharist that is the ongoing sacrament of reconciliation. Now, that's a different story, so I will not go into here, but the point is that God's forgiveness is always part of his love. That's what Pope Francis keeps reminding us, that we live in a world of God's mercy, and that forgiveness is a loving gift of God. And when we forgive another, we are doing what Jesus does, because it doesn't really come out of my heart. I mean, something has to get into my heart, and that's what Jesus' presence in my life is about. To be able to be with the Father and be the source of love so that I can now, with him, forgive when I'd rather not forgive, as I usually don't. So I still have these doubts and these emotions of fear, of skepticism, hesitancy. But even more, I find that the remark of Jesus is an invitation to join him in his mission. Jesus did have those who walked away. Look at when he was giving the thing in John's Gospel 6 about the bread of life. Will you two go away? Where should we go? So Jesus did have people who walked away, but nonetheless, he continues to invite us into the deep desire that he has that forgiveness will conquer all forms of resistance, that healing will conquer all forms of despair, and that love will conquer our fears. So enjoy the coming of summer, enjoy the end of the pandemic. God bless you, and be at peace.